Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. My voice is a little strained because she's squeezing me.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
it
it-
sounds a little
and-
different there.
And it's kind of difficult to swallow. Can you loosen up a bit, babe? Come on.
That's what she said.
That was uncalled for.
Oh,
This thing has a grip.
Yes, you set it up perfectly.
I told him that he has an addiction.
He does, yeah.
yes. Everybody, please send tots and pairs, and maybe we can all read little, impact statements. To get our enough help that the snakes are no longer, choking him to death during the show. Because
Well, yeah, this is a new one. This is a Dominican red mountain boa. And
I'm sorry,
she's-
could you say that again? I couldn't quite understand you.
A Dominican red mountain boa, and she's like 6'8", so she's like around me a few times.
That's a
So-
big ass snake.
Yeah, we will soldier through.
He's dying.
loosen her from your neck. Okay, Peter, get me
Fine.
Yolanda's number so I can text her because her husband is being an idiot.
Listen, if the Israelites can handle the desert for 40 years, Aaron can handle a little boa.
As
Yeah.
he opens a drink while it's hard to swallow. This is perfectly normal behavior.
I think Aaron heard that like science guys always have bow ties, and he misheard. So.
Right.
If I didn't know any
Bow
better,
tie.
Yes. Boa ties
Hi,
are cool.
Bo.
He
if I didn't know any better, I would suspect you people are making fun of me.
Yeah, he misheard. He thought it was boa tie instead of bow tie.
Ah,
Yes,
that's
they-
it. Yes.
That's what I
Caught on
said.
to it. Yes, that's exactly what he said.
Okay. So,
Aaron-
Leviticus 26. Any opening? Yeah.
Aaron, if God exists, he will
What do you
now
say,
have sent a serpent to kill you on the show because you're making fun of his book. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm not the interesting one. The interesting one is the Lilith, when she leaned forward, she just like was fading in and out of reality because of her green screen. It was really cool effect.
Yes, I'm more interesting than you choking yourself to death on screen with a boa.
I'm not doing it. So,
But-
Lawrence,
Yes.
any preface for this chapter?
Oh, I mean, the only one would be that this is the end of the Holiness Code. So then, yeah, after this, we're gonna have the final chapter of Leviticus, and boy, am
Actually,
I glad to be done.
I've read that Leviticus 26 was the original ending of Leviticus, and then 27 was added later on to
you have to
to
like,
cover
I
something
can't
else.
swallow.
Sure, but either way,
Postscript.
chapter 26 would be the end of the Holiness Code.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Which is not all of Leviticus, but yeah.
Yeah.
And
Good
that
chunk.
might be the biggest thing. We were talking about it in the pre-show about the similarities to Deuteronomy. And what chapter did you say that was, Isaac? Would you say it was
11.
Deuteronomy 11? Yeah, it also shares some similarities to Deuteronomy 28, I believe, in form and function. And now, once we get to Deuteronomy 28, it's a wild chapter. Like, when I was reading that on stream on Atheist Sunday School, my mind was actively being blown because Deuteronomy 28 is intense. So this is
Good.
not at that point yet, but it's getting there once we get to the curses part.
Here we go.
Good.
Sorry, I just had to
Ah,
scroll
yes.
through the whole Deuteronomy.
God
This one
does
does.
have some fun curses.
Okay.
Oh, they're wild, yeah.
Hi.
All right, so
Who's
since
re-
Aaron
who's
can't get-
reading?
Who's reading? Yes.
How about we choose someone who can speak?
Yeah, let's do that. No one here can talk.
I suggest either Lawrence or Ember.
Yeah, I can do it. It's been a while since I've
Sure.
Since I read-
Read up to 26.
26. Where are we at here? Okay,
No,
so
he's reading 26.
Yeah.
Up to, yeah. I mean,
So I am reading from Robert Alter's translation. You shall make no idols, nor set up a sculpted image or a sacred pillar for yourself, and you shall not put a figured stone in your land to bow over it. For I am the Lord your God. My Sabbaths you shall keep, and my sanctuary you shall revere. I am the Lord. If you go by my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, I shall give you rains in their season, and the land will give its yield, and the tree of the field will give you its fruit. And your threshing will overtake the vintage, and the vintage will overtake the sowing, and you will eat your bread to the full, and you will dwell securely in your land. And I shall set peace in the land, and you will lie down with none to make him tremble. And I shall make evil beasts cease from the land, and no sword will pass through your land. And you will pursue your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. And 5 of you will pursue 100, and 100 of you will pursue 10,000, and your enemies will fall before you by the sword. And I shall
That always
turn,
happened.
yeah, always, every time.
Totally.
And I shall turn toward you and make you fruitful and multiply you and fulfill my covenant with you. And you will eat old grain long stored, and you will clear out the old for the new. And I shall place my tabernacle in your midst, and I shall not loathe you. And I shall go about in your midst, and I shall be God to you. And as for you, you will be my people. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from your being slaves to them, and I broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk upright. But if you do not heed me and do not do all these commandments, and if you reject my statutes, and if you loathe my laws, not doing all my commands, voiding my covenant, I on my part will do this to you. I will direct panic against you, consumption and fever, wasting the eyes and making the throat ache, and you shall sow your seed in vain, and your enemies shall eat it.
What?
Right, yeah.
Oh,
That's metal.
kinky.
And I will set this is not even as
Wait.
crazy as Deuteronomy 28 gets.
Oh no, not even. I'm
Wait,
sure,
wait.
but
The
still.
the curse is that the enemies will eat the seed.
Yes. That's different than Deuteronomy 28, where they themselves will be the ones that eat their children. And I
I feel
will
like that's a
set
bit of
my
a curse
face.
on the enemy.
Oh, children. Okay. I thought the godless heathen atheists were supposed to be the baby eaters. Why is God doing
well,
the-
I think I have
Well,
a
so
comment
your
on this.
seed, there might be a different, there might be an actual
Might just
like,
be an
oh, this is
agricultural
for
sense.
for seed. Yeah.
Well, it could
But-
be the
but
grains
it-
you planted. Yeah.
And I will set my face
Okay.
against you, and you shall be routed before your enemies, and your foes shall hold sway over you, and you shall flee with none pursuing you. And if even with these you do not heed me, I will go on to chastise you sevenfold more for your offenses. Call back to Cain there. And I will break the pride of your strength and make your heavens like iron and your breath like bronze, and your power shall be spent in vain, and your land shall not give its yield, and the tree of the land shall not
You
give
said
its
breath.
Wait, did I say what
Sorry,
did I say? When?
You said
Yeah,
breath.
you made your breath like bronze, and I got confused. How
Sorry,
can breath
sorry.
be like
Your earth like bronze. My bad.
Okay.
My bad. Let's see, where was I? And if
You
you
from
come,
L'Oreal Paris. Breath like bronze.
Ah,
if you come
Wait,
and
is that a
encounter
passion?
against me and do not want to heed me, I will go with blows against you sevenfold for your offenses, and I will unleash the beasts of the field among you, and they shall bereave you of your children and cut off your cattle and diminish you, and your roads will be desolate. And if through these you do not take chastisement by me, and you come and encounter against me, I on my part will come and encounter against you, and I myself will strike you sevenfold for your offenses, and I will bring against you the avenging sword of the covenant's vengeance. And you shall gather into your towns, and I will send pestilence into your midst, and you shall be given into an enemy's hands. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven and dole out your bread by weight, and you shall eat and not be sated.
I keep beating them. Why don't they love me?
Yeah, right. This speaks to quite a lot of like the exilic mindset, because during the exile, we'll see this a lot more in the prophets, the Jews essentially blame themselves for the exile. Like they were sent to exile and they were like, you know what, this is obviously our fault, right? Like this happened to us because we didn't follow it well enough. So this
why did
kind
you
of has
make
the
me
same
hit you
mindset.
like that? The role of the priest is to make sure that whatever happens, it's the people's fault if it's bad, and it's God's fault if it's good.
No, the thing is, that was a very common thing, not just the priesthood, right? Like that was just what the people at the time seemed to believe, at least the ones that we have record of, right? So they kind of viewed the Babylonians as the sword that is being sent through the land, right? So that was the vengeance that God is taking upon them for not following the law properly.
That was the opinion that eventually came to be and is definitely shown in the Bible. But at least if you read The Evolution of God, I believe it's Robert Wright, he talks about how that was in a sense a justification that came in, and that train of thought really expanded and developed and became more universal because of the Exodus. In the older way of thinking with the henotheistic or polytheistic God, if your God is stronger, your God wins. If my God beats your God, then my God is stronger, and ha 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 ha. But that the attempt to say, no, our God has not abandoned us, and keep the group faithful and together, led to more and more disagreement, which meant it all had to be their fault. And it's frightening. We see very similar sets of justifications about how it must all be part of the plan, despite not being what we expected. We just have to stay faithful. We have to keep believing and supporting, because, obviously it's a 5D chess move and we just can't see the wisdom of what appears there.
I'll start my commentary, I think. About the sacred stone in verse 1. So in Hebrew, it's Even Maskit. The exact meaning of Maskit is not clear. The Septuagint reads guardian stone, I think. Vulgate reads a remarkable stone, and Targum Onkelos a prostration zone. Targum Pseudo Jonathan and Sadia Gaon and Ibn Ezra render it a figured stone.
I have a pretty rock.
Mesquite are just the wood chips you use on a barbecue.
And
yeah,
the village
obviously
near
it's the
Dallas.
same one. Absolutely no language difference there. None at all.
None at all. Also, I have a pretty rock. Is this sufficient blasphemy?
Shut up.
I think it might be. Depends on how you use it. But yeah, this the figured stone, right? It looks like altar, suggesting that it might derive from a verb that means to look.
I haven't finished my comment.
Sorry.
Rashi derives it from the word kisui, to cover, that is, covering the ground with a stone floor. Rashbam derives it from the root shin kaf hey, to look, from Isaiah 2:16 and Psalm 73:7, and it refers to a stone that has figures and painting to look at. Levine and Milgrom prefer Targum Pseudo Jonathan's rendition, figured stone, based on Ezekiel 8 verses 10 to 12, where the term chadrei maskit refers to image-covered chambers. Verse 2, this verse is a repetition of 1930. While Milgrom writes that the purpose of it is to allude to the fourth commandment, he offers the possibility that it was added to indicate the legislator's view that working the land on the weekly Sabbath is a violation, much like the septennial Sabbath that incurs and prolongs the exile. Verse 3, my decrees, my commands. Abravanel writes that this refers to the sabbatical and jubilee laws of chapter 25, since in verse 4 it speaks about granting rains in their season so that the earth will produce its crops in abundance. Milgrom, however, writes that the terms chukotai, decrees, and mitzvotai, commands, are described in other laws in age, for example, 18 verses 45 and 26, 1937, and 2022. Thus, they refer to the entire holiness source.
Hukatai? That's what Lorence has, isn't it?
Chukotai.
Close. Almost there. I wish. If there were hookahs in the Bible, that'd be way better.
It would be a little more chill.
Verse 4, rain in its season. Levine comments, in the land of Israel, as in adjacent areas, rainfall is limited to a fixed season of the year. At other times, there is no rain for months on end. If sufficient rain does not fall at the expected time, the results are more harmful than in temperate climates. This explains the repeated emphasis on rains in their season.
Yeah, I mean, for not just the rains in your season, right? You know, the land giving its yield to, because they relied on agriculture, and the like we will see a lot more of this, you know, things being in their season, you know, when the time is right kind of thing. There's this whole passage in Ecclesiastes about it, for example, how at some point it seemed like there was this general philosophy, I'll call it, about uh, things happening when they should and not outside of that, which is where we get the whole you know how Jesus was in the fig tree, right? That whole story,
Mm.
like, you know, it's growing
It was
outside
not the
of its
time
season.
for figs, but
Yeah.
he cursed it anyway.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it kind of stems from that same idea.
Or the one was it Ecclesiastes that the Beatles made the song about? You know, to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven.
Right. Yeah.
And granted, the idea of cycles and nature being on, you know, complex cyclical things. Hail Satan. Is, you know, it's something you see a lot more in places like, if you think about like India and Hinduism, it's not as likely to just, people are not as likely to just starve from the water not being enough for the crops or things like that. So their cycles tend to be more stable and their gods tend to be more predictable. Whereas in countries where circumstances are not really terribly forgiving or consistent, please stop dying, Aaron. You're scaring me.
He's like slowly going back into his seat, like I am losing breath.
Yeah. It's when nature is reliable, the gods they make are reliable, and when nature is a capricious bastard, so are the gods it creates.
Verse 6, I will remove wild beasts. The Hebrew for remove is vehishbati, derived from the root shin bet taf, to cease or rest. And so it literally reads, I will cause to cease wild beasts. According to the Sifra, this is done either by removing them or by neutralizing them, i.e. changing their nature. Philo, in the Rewards and Punishments 88, connects the two parts of the verse. Quote, that when the wild beasts within us are fully tamed, the animals too will become tame and gentle.
That was always a huge appeal that, like, you could befriend all living creatures like serpents or tigers, or basically this is the appeal to the like white women ain't scared of shit meme.
It reminds me of something that happened on my farm when I was growing up. We had a big old flock of geese, and you know, geese have this reputation for being notoriously unpleasant. And they just wander around the yard, and you know, we didn't need to mow the lawn because we had geese and goats. And one day some Jehovah's Witnesses came up the driveway, and the geese did their thing, and they like barred the driveway and were honking at them. And the lead witness just threw up his arms and said, "Children of God, part before me." But when he threw up his arms, the geese threw up their wings and charged, and they ran away.
The
See, if
force
they were
is not
Mormons,
with you.
if they were Mormons, then the birds would have liked them, I think.
Perhaps.
Sure.
Something about seagulls, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 8.
thought that was
The
Legolas.
proportion. Yeah, the proportions given in this verse are 1 to 20 and 1 to 100. Milgrom notes that usually we'll find multiples of 10, for example, in Judges 20:10 and Amos 5:3. He gives 4 possible answers. Quote, 1. Ebenezer writes that groups of 5 are more powerful together than separately. That is, when the attacking force grows in arithmetic proportions, the rout of the vanquished grows in geometric proportions. 2. Gersonides writes that the proportions are, in their
Cubical.
psychological effect. What?
I said the square cube law.
Yeah, in the psychological effect, I'll repeat this. 2. Gersonides writes that the proportions are, in the psychological effect, equivalent. The victory of 5 will be valued as more of a miracle than a victory of 100. 3. Bechol Shor writes that the group of 5 will be considered by the enemy as the vanguard of a larger army. 4. Other ratios are attested elsewhere in Scripture, Deuteronomy 32:30, Joshua 23:10, and Isaiah 30:17, among which Deuteronomy 32:30 also attests to an imbalance, 1 to 1,000 and 1 to 5,000. Verse 11, I will put my dwelling place. In Hebrew, the Hebrew for dwelling place here is mishkani. The Septuagint, Vulgate, and KJV read tabernacle. Milgrom, however, writes that while mishkan does mean tabernacle elsewhere in H, 1531 and 17:4, the verb I will put, venatati, indicates that there's no sanctuary building now, which is not the case. Furthermore, the blessings, curses, promises, and admonitions are directed to the future, which presume that the sanctuary exists. He proposes Targums Pseudo-Jonathan's rendition, my Shekhinah, i.e. God's presence, based on Ezekiel 37 verses 27 to 28, which interprets this passage as referring to his presence.
I have a question. Did anyone else hear Tomer glitch, or is there a problem on my end?
I did not hear a glitch.
Okay, so yeah, there might be some delay in my internet.
Yeah, your
image
Yeah,
is
your video's frozen as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Okay. Okay, I'll continue. Verse 12, I will walk among you. Rashi, based on the Sifra, interprets this phrase to mean, I will stroll with you in the Garden of Eden as one of you, and you will not be frightened of me. Milgrom notes that the choice of the verb form hitpa'el of the root hey lamet chaf for this verse, hithalachti, is also found in Genesis 3:8. And so God's blessings can bring a return of paradisiacal conditions. He further notes that Jubilees 3 verses 8 to 14 tell of the Garden of Eden being a sanctuary, and that the verb hithalachti is also used of the patriarch's walk, quote unquote, with God, as seen in Genesis 5:24, 6:9, 17:1, etc., which implies a certain intimacy with the deity gained, presumably by moral rectitude. Verse 16, the medical conditions described in this verse are also found in Deuteronomy 28:22, and their exact identity is not known. The wasting diseases, KJV JPS renders consumption, is shachefet. Vulgate renders poverty, and Peshita leprosy. Rashi describes it as, quote, a sickness which causes the flesh to swell, meshachef, like a swollen person whose swelling has subsided, and the appearance of his face is washed out, end quote. Saadia Gaon and Ibn Janach render it consumption, based on the Arabic sukhaf. This rendition is preferred by Milgrom and Levine. The fever, KJV renders burning og, I think, is kadachat, derived from the root kuf dalet chet, to burn or flare. Thus, the Vulgate reads burning heat, and Saadia Gaon renders perpetual heat. Rashi describes it as, quote, a sickness which inflames, makdiach, the body, makes it hot and burning, end quote. And the Septuagint renders it jaundice.
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 Jaundice, yeah.
You turn yellow.
English, my English is so perfect, guys. Okay.
So on this, the issue of consumption, I was wondering about that. I think that they know what disease that is, but what was commonly referred to as consumption, is that cancer? Is that ever a cancer, or is it just?
No, it's tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, yeah. Consumption of the lungs, you slowly lose your capacity to breathe. I don't imagine it was exclusively tuberculosis. I'm sure lots of other things fell into that category, but yeah, it largely.
Famously, was through various points in history thought to be vampirism.
Ah, right, of course, because you would cough up blood. So obviously you'd been nibbling on your neighbors in their sleep.
And other people would die in a chain, and so you'd have to dig up the original vampire, the first person to come down with it, and take their heart out, burn their heart in a special ritual and things, and then everybody'd have to drink a potion made from the ashes of the burned heart to be cured. But sometimes it didn't work, shockingly enough.
Sometimes?
Wow, really? It didn't?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Listen, I don't know if I believe that it didn't work.
Well, he said sometimes. Maybe they didn't actually identify the correct first vampire.
Yeah, they
I
just
guess
did it
if you
wrong.
die of something else.
Yeah, could be.
If the cure kills you in another way, then I guess it works.
Well, yeah.
Actually, it's interesting to note here. Luzzatto proposed that these diseases refer to plant diseases as well, like Amos 4:9, quote, I scourged you with blight and mildew, end quote, thereby explaining the rest of the verse. Ibn Ezra, however, rejects this, since the enemy does take possession of the grain, quote, your enemies will eat it, end quote. Thus, the diseases are intended to weaken the farmers so that they wouldn't oppose the invaders. Verse 18, 7 times over. The word translated to 7 here, Sheva, is repeated 3 times in this chapter, verses 21, 23, and 28. While some, like Rashi and Targums Pseudo Jonathan, understood the word literally, 7 punishments against the 7 transgressions, with you will flee in verse 17 counted as 2, stated in verses 16 to 17. But even Ezra notes that there are only 6 transgressions in this verse, in these verses, and thus cannot be taken literally. Further, as Milgrom notes, if the number 7 was meant, then this word will have been read Shiv'atayim, as seen in Genesis 4:15, 24, and Isaiah 32. Chizkuni suggested that this word hints to the neglected sabbatical year in verse 34. Milgrom, however, writes that the Sheva here must be regarded as a round number, as seen in 1 Samuel 2:5, Isaiah 4:1, Luke 17:4, etc., and that the number 7 has been chosen regardless of the exact enumeration because it was thought to possess a magical capacity of threat.
Well, so I'm not sure about, because I don't know Hebrew, I don't know about the connection to the word that's used in Genesis, but the idea of suffering things sevenfold does seem to be a biblical motif. And the thing is, if we are to read this as sevenfold here, then what we should be gathering is not, of course, the 7 punishments for one. Rather, it is a punishment that is 7 times worse. And in biblical notation, that would be something like this is like it completes the punishment, right? The punishment is it's like a full retribution to completion. So I wouldn't necessarily read like 7 punishments for one for one crime. Rather, it's just the same biblical notation there. But like I said, if we were to translate it a different way, what would be the
I mean, I've heard that 7, because 3 is supposed to be the number of perfection, and then 7 is twice 3 plus 1 bonus 1, just to be sure. So it's like almost that over completion within the bounds of the law, just going a little too far just to make sure you covered it, kind of thing.
I think it means complete. Just
it would be in Kabbalah, I think 7 normally represents nature.
Yeah, but Kabbalah's
and
they've been
saying
like I wish I had access to.
Nature, and I think 8 is like a miracle or something.
Yeah, because 8 is used. I think it was used in the Wisdom of Ben Sira too, because it's supposed to be not just completeness, but it's supposed to be even greater than completeness. So like the whole like X, the whole X and X plus 1 notation has been used a lot.
I have to say, the dumbest things in the history of theological thought, some of the dumbest...
We've noticed that about you.
Shut up. Some of the dumbest things in theological thought have been brought about by people taking magical numbers literally.
I'm sorry, you said I have to say the dumbest things about theological thought, and you just left that comma with a space. I had to jump on it.
I think theological.
There's a lot of
theological thoughts are some of the best thoughts there are.
I mean, the Pythagoreans were.
Tell that to the poor Jehovah's Witnesses who are trying to get people into a pyramid scheme that will push them out of heaven and leave them on a totes paradise earth where they have to clean up the genocide after God.
But if you get in the downline early enough and build your own flow community, whatever, then you can rest easy while your minions do the work or something.
Yeah. But I mean, it's such a glutted 100 years, and plus you have to fix in all the biblical characters of note into the 144,000. So unfortunately, that doesn't leave a lot of slots left. Plus, all the governing body members definitely get that. So really.
Verse 19, make the sky above you like iron. So Levine comments, the same statement occurs in the execration of Deuteronomy 28:33 and in the treatise of King Esarhaddon of Assyria, who ruled in the 7th century BCE. In these treaties, the king's vassals are warned that they will be severely punished by the gods of the empire for any violations of the treaties. The sense of the statement is that the rains will cease and the artesian springs of the earth will become dry.
So it is interesting then. Does your translation the heavens like iron, but then the earth like bronze. Yeah, never mind. I misheard what you said. Okay.
Tom, are you gonna say the bit from the Sifra or whatever that's like the bronze isn't as bad as iron in this curse?
Oh no, I didn't.
Oh, because bronze exudes moisture.
Yeah. I asked you. I asked on Discord. I asked, does bronze sweat or something like this? I did ask you because it uses the term mazia, which means to sweat. So I thought, what? Does it sweat?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me see.
Who knows what they thought back then?
Yeah.
Just as copper exudes moisture, while the earth will not exude, just as iron does not exude, and so it will keep its fruit in good condition, since it will not be too humid. But if the land and the earth will exude because it is humid,
but the term that is used for the exude moisture is mazia, which also means to sweat. So yeah, that's what I thought. I asked.
That could be a more modern.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
perhaps. Verse 21, if you remain hostile toward me. The word translated to hostile is keri, which appears only in this chapter 7 times, and according to Milgrom, indicates its significance as a key stylistic and semantic element in the entire list of curses. The exact etymology of keri is unclear. Targum Onkelos renders stubbornly, both and also the Septuagint, both deriving keri from kuf resh resh, to be cold. Targum Pseudo-Jonathan reads accidentally from mikre, chance or accident. Milgrom notes that in Ugaritic, the root qry means encounter or meet with. And so Hebrew likrat means toward or against, contrary to, as seen in Numbers 21:23 and 1 Samuel 4:2. And so the phrase reads, if you walk against me, meaning that if Israel walks contrary to God, he in turn will walk contrary to Israel. Verse 22, I will send wild animals against you. This is the reverse of verse 6, I will remove wild beasts. Milgrom notes that the outbreak of wild beasts was considered a punishment for sin, as seen in Deuteronomy 32:24, 2 Kings 2:24, 17:25, etc. Citing Weinfeld, he writes that the Sephirah Treaty 1A 27-28 from the 8th century BCE features a series of punishments of drought, wasteland, and wild animals. He further writes, Gerstenberger aptly points to the story of the bears that mauled the 42 children who were cursed by Elisha for having teased him by calling him Baldy, seen in 2 Kings 2 verses 23-24, as playing the same role in Israel as the bogey bear in our tradition. Namely, if you children do not behave, you will be eaten by the bears. Here too, the adults are warned that if they do not heed Yahweh's commandments, predatory beasts will devour them.
Yeah, and it's also important to know that it was seen as a very degrading way to die. Like one of the because we talked about degrading ways to die multiple times, but like one of them was of course outside the land. This one is being eaten by beasts. So Toma referenced the section in Kings, and it's interesting to note that during it would have been just after this period, but the Persians actually they would often send once you hit the age of 70, you were thought to be too old, so they would send you out into the wilderness to die.
Cool.
As one does. That's how you keep yourself.
I would have to find the reference, but it was in a book I was reading on Persian history by Olmsted.
Nice. But the wild animal thing reminds me of the modern American meme about 30 to 50 feral hogs.
So I'm just thinking this is the I've heard of this kind of a social security plan that they had it in
the American one.
Yes.
You just let your old die in the streets. That's
Yeah, this is the far right version of we're just going to take away Social Security, and this is what we'll do. Well, this is what we'll put in its place, because I've heard a lot of people that are talking about getting rid of Social. Of course, we know which side of the aisle they're on, but they're talking about getting rid of Social Security. And what are we going to do with the old people? Well, I guess go out and play out there in the woods
with the
Yeah, I
bears.
mean, in ancient times, I guess, being ripped apart by beasts was seen as like, not a nice way to die, and it's kind of like the modern equivalent
There
would
are
be like,
also
I know.
beliefs about your body and your soul, like you weren't
Yeah,
allowed
you
to burn
need
bodies
your
in
body
some
later.
cultures because that would
You have to
prevent
be
you from going
buried.
to the
Yeah, you
spirit
need to be
world.
buried.
Others, you would have to be burned. It
Yeah,
it changed with the belief system, but
yeah.
it was never good to just be shredded. And
I think
I guess
the
a
Reverend
modern
free on
equivalent would be
Prime right
like,
now.
dying by dressing up as a moose during hunting season or something.
I think the Reverend's free on Prime right now. Just for
oh,
I'm also thinking of Logan's Run. Like, it's a much more civilized way to deal with old people is turn them into crackers.
And what was the other movie with it? Soylent Green, same concept.
Verse 26, supply of bread. In Hebrew, it's mateh lechem, which literally means staff of bread, as the Vulgate and KJV render it. This idiom is found in Ezekiel 4:16, 5:16, and 14:13 in the sense of breaking the food supply. And the 10 women...
Baguettes.
Sorry.
I said, were they baguettes?
No. 10 women. Sa'adik Gaon and Rashbam render many women, as seen in Genesis 31:7, Job 19:3, Zechariah 8:23. Milgrom notes that this was a popular image in ancient Near Eastern curses. For example, the Hadad Yithi bilingual inscription, dated from around the 850 BCE, line 22, reads, "May 100 women bake bread in an oven and shall not fill it." And the Buchan inscription, dated to mid to late 8th century BCE, lines 6 to 8, reads, "May 7 women bake bread in one oven and not fill it."
So in those times, especially for baking bread, the oven type was kind of like a kiln sort of thing. So like clay cone like this with an opening at the bottom for the fire, and they would stick the bread on the inside of the clay all around inside.
Like just flat to the side, and then
and then it would and then it would bake, and then they would take it off, I guess, and then kind of scrape the baked goodies off.
Milgrom says that it was the simple oven was a pit about 2.5 feet in diameter.
Well, yeah, that's probably an earlier. Yeah. I'm guessing what I'm talking about is actually more like much later. Actually, it's more like 300 BC.
That's it from a commentary on this part.
All right, I can continue then after 26. And if despite this you do not heed me, and you come and encounter against me, I will come against you in wrathful encounter, and I on my part will chastise you sevenfold for your offenses, and you shall eat you shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters you shall eat, and I will destroy your cult places and cut off your incense stands, and I will put your corpses on top of the corpses of your fetishes. That being not our modern use of the term fetishes. And I will loathe you.
Graven images.
Yep. And I will turn your towns into ruins and lay waste your sanctuaries, and I will not smell your fragrant odors. And I myself will lay waste to the. Oh my god, I love the terminology there. I won't smell your delicious smells. Like it's a very.
Yeah, it's a body odor fetish. Yeah.
You'd see that in some comedy routine now. And I myself will lay waste to the land, and all your enemies who settle in it shall be appalled by it. And you I will scatter among the nations, and I will unsheath the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your towns a ruin. Then shall the land expiate its Sabbath years, all the days it is desolate, while you are in the land of your enemies. Then shall the land keep a Sabbath and expiate its Sabbath years. All the days of the desolation it shall keep a Sabbath for not having kept your Sabbath years when you dwelled there. And those left among you I will bring faintness into their hearts, in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a driven leaf shall pursue them. And they shall flee as in flight from the sword and fall, with none pursuing. And each man shall stumble against his brother as before the sword, with none pursuing. And there shall be no standing up for you in the face of your enemies, and you shall perish among the nations. And the land of your enemies shall consume you. And those left among you shall rot in their guilt in the lands of your enemies, and also in the guilt of their fathers, with them they shall rot. And they shall confess their guilt and the guilt of their fathers, in their betraying my trust, and also in their coming in encounter against me. I, on my part, will come in encounter against them, and bring them into the land of their enemies, and then shall their uncircumcised heart be humbled, and then shall they expiate their guilt. And I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham I will remember, and the land I will remember. And the land shall be forsaken of them, and it shall expiate its Sabbath years when it is desolate of them, and they shall expiate their guilt, by very reason that they have rejected my laws, and my statutes they have loathed. Yet even this too, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them, and I will not loathe them to put an end to them, to void my covenant with them, for I am the Lord their God. And I will remember for them the covenant of the first ones whom I brought out of the land of Egypt before the eyes of the nations, to be God for them. I am the Lord. These are the statutes and the laws and the teachings that the Lord set out between himself and the Israelites on Mount Sinai through the hand of Moses. And that is the
Okay,
end
so
of 6.
Yeah.
I've got a question about this. So
That's Amber. Yeah.
We haven't finished yet.
What's the question, Aaron? What's the question?
So this implies, I mean, God is a vindictive little shit, isn't he? I mean, yeah, I said obey me, and he's got real shades of my stepdad in here. But this implies that hell is not reserved for people who have sinned in life, and then see, you're going to be punished in this life. God is very determined. He's going to. There's nothing about being burned, damned. There's no afterlife thing. If you disagree with me, you're catching shit now while you're alive.
Yeah,
And your children and your children's children.
Remember, this is a. Sorry, go ahead, P-Town.
Well, unless you repent.
Right, unless you're a pen, yeah. But the issue, look at Art's face. But this is obviously about this is a law. This is a legal text, right? So like all the stuff here is, while yes, it has like that divine aspect to it, the punishments will be doled out here on earth. So it still stays within that context. We obviously won't get hell stuff until later. That didn't even exist yet. We had Sheol, right, which would just be the grave, or just some very rudimentary version of an afterlife that wasn't so hot, right? Like the Mesopotamians had it as some dreary reflection of this life, like everything's
Land
just gray and boring, dust on the doors and everything like that. We don't nearly have that kind of developed afterlife idea quite yet, at least in terms of punishment. Although one of the things that I wanted to note here, this is from Van Setter's book, A Law Book for the Diaspora. He notes something very, very cool, I think, and this is why I love Van Setter so much. So if the law is understood as dealing with a class or group of persons, your enemy, who are not Israelites, then it must mean those who live outside the territory of Israel. This raises the obvious question of the circumstances under which the animals of the enemy would be encountered by Israelites, who are then to return them. This is in reference to Exodus, actually, but he references this here. So about returning the animals, and then references to your enemy, right? The answer must be when the Israelites are living in close proximity or among the enemy, and that is precisely the situation of the Babylonian exile. It is significant that Leviticus 26:35 through 45 speaks repeatedly of the exile as the land of your enemies. In that situation, a stray animal might very well belong to an enemy. So he kind of notes this as indicative of an exilic place, right, in the land of your enemies.
It's still very, very the abusive spouse. I'll beat you, I'll punish you until you love me again. I'll make you grovel and beg, and then maybe I'll forgive you, but I'll never, never let you go.
Well, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
right. Like eventually, I'll remember them. I will. Like once that punishment has been doled out.
Yeah, but
So
even like he won't just let you leave. He's just gonna keep punishing you until you come crawling back, and then he might, out of his beneficence, forgive
This
you.
reminds me also. This reminds me also of going back to Genesis. When God found out that Adam and Eve found out good from evil, there was no hell yet. There is no place for damned souls yet. The Christians haven't yet invented that concept. So God has to threaten. He told Adam and Eve what the consequence would be, and then he was too angry for that. Somehow he didn't see the trap that he set as coming to fruition the way he planned it, and now he has to change the criteria. So it's not that in that day you will die, but you're going to have all of these other petty, vindictive torments heaped upon you, and it's the same kind of thing that he's doing here. You're going to suffer all of these things in life and then die. And there's no afterlife reference still.
Right, not here. Yeah.
Yeah, if this is a exilic or post-exilic text, then it's either seems to be in a case of like a prophecy that's written after the fact.
Yeah, it's
at least most of it.
That would be.
It's talking about the Babylonian exile.
Ex eventu is the type of prophecy. But yeah,
Prophecy ex
as
eventu.
yeah. So yeah, Tomer noted how this shared similarities to like other treaties, right? Especially with the one of the Sardon, but it also does share some similarities to Hittite ones. The only major difference is that this is being given through Moses, right, where he is essentially taking the place of an ancient Near Eastern ruler, and it is being reinterpreted into this prophetic oracle. Interestingly, though, that promise of restoration doesn't have a parallel in Deuteronomy 28.
I think
So maybe it's post-exilic.
Arn, in a symbolic way, it kind of alludes to a heaven. If you look at it like Egypt is of the world, then they're marching around in the wilderness. You go through the desert, kind of like our lives now, and then the promised land, which is heaven. This is, I know, very allegorical,
and not in the text at all.
It in an off the beat
It's
kind of
not
way.
in the text.
It
You
is.
can use the text to draw that analogy, but the analogy is coming from you. It's not
you could misinterpret the text to be that way, but that's not implied by the text at all. I got a couple of comments to read. Bruco1 says, "Aaron, you are awesome. Thanks, but it makes me feel awkward to get compliments like that." Nate the lawyer, hey, and Nate offers $5 and says, "I finally caught this live. LOL. Great to see the group again. Got to buy Aaron a steak now that I live in Texas now. LOL."
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm down with that. It's funny when people come to Texas and they say, "Hey, while I'm in Texas, why don't I just go visit somebody that lives in Texas?" Maybe, they don't realize it's a
Just
7.5 hour drive. Yeah. So Nate, hopefully you live less than 7 hours away, because there's places in Texas it'll take me 12 hours to get to. But I'm down for a steak offer. And then Minute Rice offers $6.66 and says, "I missed the start of the stream. What kind of necklace does Aaron have on?" I am wearing a Dominican red mountain boa tie, and she is 6'8" and still has effects on my swallowing and voice.
I was going to
She's
say, don't drive.
semi-arboreal. Yeah. Oh, no, I did. I had to. When I got her, my wife sent me to the store. My wife sent me to the store that we're setting up the enclosure that we need to put the snake in. She sent me to the store to get a couple of things, but I couldn't find the things. So I had to go to 2 different stores. I'm driving around and going to multiple stores like this because she won't let go. So I'm walking in a store and say, "Hey, do you have this?" And people are just looking at me aghast.
They just thought it was a scarf, and they're like, "What is he doing in Texas in this weather with a scarf on?"
Hmm.
All right, so
Okay.
done with the comments.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 29. Yeah. Okay.
Wait.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were.
Yeah,
wanted
the
to move
comments
on
are
to the
done.
next chapter. Okay, finish
Yeah.
the chapter.
Okay, verse 29. Milgrom notes that cannibalism is a frequent theme in ancient Near Eastern curses. For example, Vassal Treatise of Esarhaddon, ANET page 538, section 47, reads, "May you eat in your hunger the flesh of your children. May, through want and famine, one man eat the other's flesh, clothe himself in the other's skin," which is pretty metal. He further writes that according to a prophetic story in 2 Kings 6, verses 28 to 29, Israel experienced cannibalism during the Aramean Wars, and Ezekiel borrows this theme and expands it in Ezekiel 5:10. Heath Durrell, however, in Child Sacrifice in Ancient Israel, page 161, writes, "While there are a handful of references to cannibalism in the Hebrew Bible, including Leviticus, 2 Kings, and Ezekiel, all of these are in the context of extreme duress. There is no indication that cannibalism ever constituted any part of Israelite cultic practice."
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't think it would be cannibalism necessarily, right? As like a
It is
regular thing.
something, however, that God apparently considers appropriate to deliver as a punishment.
Not only that, but in Deuteronomy, we don't see it here, but in Deuteronomy, he says that he's going to enjoy making you do that.
Yeah, which is why on Twitter last week I put out a call, and I will make it again at any time. Give me any atrocity, any evil, any violation of the Geneva Conventions, any war crime. I will find you where in the Bible God either does it personally or directly orders it done.
Verse 30, high places. In Hebrew, it's bamotechem, from the singular bama. And Levine comments, Hebrew bama, a term for various cult installations, means back, as we now know from Ugaritic, where we find BMT, bamat pachal, the back of a mare on which goods are loaded. Hebrew bama has, therefore, two connotations. One, topographically, it refers to the high ridges or peaks of mountains, as in Amos 4:13 or in Deuteronomy 32:13. This parallels the sense of the shoulder, quote-unquote, of a mountain, as in Joshua 15:10. Two, architecturally, it refers to a raised platform or structure, as is the meaning here. The books of Kings often refer to the bamot, which were tolerated by most kings, but condemned by pious monotheists. Both usages reflect a semantic process whereby the physiognomy of humans and animals is transferred to the inanimate natural world as well as architecture.
Yeah, the thing is, you say by pious monotheists, that's definitely an oversimplification. The high places, right? The Bama, right? Those were in use for quite a while. I think we've even discovered some of them. These were like one of the things that at least the Deuteronomists were like, no, none of this has to change, right? Which is why eventually we get to Josiah, and eventually we get their their removal. But even like I don't even think Hezekiah got rid of them, did he? But even though he was listed as a very pious king, I don't remember him getting rid of them. And even then, like there were pious kings, like good kings. They were said to be good kings, but they all the stuff they did was really good, but they didn't get rid of the high places. That's in many places in the king's narrative.
And by the way, it's physiognomy. I horribly butchered that pronunciation. Sorry.
You still did. It's physiognomy.
I see some pages that say physiognomy, so don't gaslight me. Okay.
It should be noted for what Lorence was saying when they talk about a righteous king, that a righteous king to these just means someone who worshipped Yahweh and did what the priests told him. So it doesn't actually mean that he was just or virtuous in any way or took care of his people or wasn't a horrible monster. It just means he did good by God, and God liked him because he fed the priests extra and did what they said like a good boy.
About the incense altars. In Hebrew, it's chamanechem, singular chaman. Targum Onkelos, followed by Rashi and Ibn Ezra, renders sun images from Chama, which means sun, which are set up on roofs under the sun. Levine writes that Haman refers to altars dedicated to Baal Hamon, a deity attested in Ugaritic and Phoenician inscriptions. Milgrom notes that an Aramaic inscription written on an altar from Palmyra reads, "This Haman and this altar," and the reverse side of the altar contains a relief depicting two standing men with an incense altar between them. Thus, some, like Albright and Harry Orlinsky, interpreted Haman to mean incense altar. Milgrom, however, based on 2 Chronicles 34:4, writes that Haman was not itself an altar, but a cult object set on the altar. Thus, he proposed reading it incense stand. About the idols, in Hebrew it's gilulechem, from the singular galal, to roll. According to Levine, this is a derisive term used to characterize pagan statues, which is probably derived from gimel lamed lamed, to roll, as to roll a stone. Milgrom, however, derives it from dung, or dung balls, as seen in 1 Kings 14:10 and Ezekiel 4, verses 12 and 15.
The scarab beetles rolling the dung balls?
I think so, yeah.
I didn't think scarabs roll dung. I know there are dung beetles in.
Oh, dung beetles, yeah. Why does
That's
I'm
that's
like,
what I
don't
would
think
figure
it's
too.
Scarab, I suppose they are of a similar size, but they don't have the big pincher.
Verses 34 to 35. Milgrom comments, "These verses constitute a parenthetical statement that interrupts the flow of verses 33 and 36. Probably an interpolation. This interpolation, however, includes verse 33b. The root shin bet taf occurs 7 times in these 2 verses, thereby linking the entire curse section to the neglect of the sabbatical year detailed in chapter 25, a point made emphatic by the particle as, then. This passage, therefore, records that the sabbatical has long before been established as a national institution. Thus, the Jubilee is the sole innovation of Leviticus 25, which furnishes evidence that the Jubilee is not a sabbatical year." Verse 41, "Their uncircumcised hearts," derived from the literal reading of Hebrew levavam he'arel. Targum Onkelos renders "their unwise heart," and Targum Pseudo Jonathan "their proud heart." Levine
Well, I would have to think that somewhere there had to be a misinterpretation. If you have uncircumcised hearts, surely they're not circumcising hearts.
Well, Levine,
in a spiritual
Levine
sense, maybe.
Yeah.
Levine comments, "This image is best known from Deuteronomy 10:16, Jeremiah 9:25, and Ezekiel 44:7. Its sense is that of a thickened, quote-unquote, heart. Whenever the image of the foreskin, or la, is employed, actual physical thickness seems to be involved. The thickened heart cannot feel or think. One whose earlobe is too thick cannot hear God's words," in Jeremiah 6:10. Moses' thickened lips made it difficult for him to speak articulately in Exodus 6:12.
And in the apocalypse of Abraham, God can't hear prayers through thick clouds. I'm not even kidding.
You need an uncircumcised sky. Does that mean the forest fire smoke is protecting me from Jehovah?
Wow.
Yahoo!
Yes, amazing.
Awesome. Now I have to say, I mean, it very
It's
much
a thrush
brings to mind-
fire.
Oh, we've got several of them actually. But it brings to mind Christopher Hitchens when he pointed out that, the worst tyrants are the ones not only who want your obedience and the content of your pockets, but they want the content of your minds. It's not enough to follow endless lines of regulation and ceremony. You have to really believe it. It has to be in here. You have to give up the content of your heart and mind and the liberty of the same. That is the worst form of tyranny because it is absolute and destroys your humanity.
Do we need to give up the content of your heart like between beats or like all the time?
Did you know that?
Hitchens was perfectly fine using the metaphorical term heart. Don't start with me on that.
Christopher Hitchens had a brother. You guys all
Yes,
knew that.
Peter.
Yeah, I just found out a week
Peter.
ago. It's It's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
the stunted one.
Yeah, they actually had a
Wait for
debate.
one.
I just found out.
Did you not watch that? That was a very interesting debate.
They didn't
No, actually,
just
I didn't
have it.
even
That was, like,
know
10 years
about
ago.
Peter until somebody suggested I watch the Oxford Union debates where he
Mhm.
shows up, and I'm like, an evil Hitchens. And then the algorithm shows me that the two brothers had a debate, and I'm like,
Okay.
oh my. I
Yeah.
haven't had a
Isn't it
chance to watch it
funny?
yet, though.
When you've got Hitchens has a brother, that's an awful lot like Thor and Loki. You've got like, I am Thor, you know, and then you've got, oh, I'm just this little pathetic Loki person. That's
Yeah.
what we got. You're like, you're Hitchens' brother. Yeah, I'm the insignificant one, the stupid one.
Well,
James,
the one with the-
brother of Jesus.
He
No,
makes
I
sense,
would not-
honestly.
The one
I
would not
wish-
put
you're talking about
Christopher Hitchens
Lawrence.
that high.
Lawrence is talking about the guy who could turn water into Bud Light.
Well,
It's-
and
it's-
Christopher
He might make
Hitchens,
more money,
you
though.
remember, Christopher Hitchens is the one who even his opponents said it was so unfair. We had 5 Christians against Christopher Hitchens. It was wildly unjust. We needed more Christians. Because, and listening to Peter, it's so sad. It's all the same bad, straw man atheist attacks that every mindless apologist has been. It doesn't even have the dignity of a, God, was it a McAllister or something, who at least had some minor understanding and respect for an atheist position. It was pitiful. It was barely better than William Lane Craig.
And there's
I
no
was in the room.
enthusiasm either.
I was in
he
the
does it
room with
almost
Hitchens.
remorsefully.
He looks like
Yeah.
he sounds just like Hitchens.
I was in
spot
the
their
room
brothers
with
a mile
Hitchens a
away.
number of times, and I was when he debated Bill Dembski in Prestonwood Baptist Church, which disturbingly, when I parked out there in one of the many parking lots for this church, I'm trying to find my way to the main building, and somebody pulled up next to me and they asked which building the debate was in. I said I think it's the one closest to the runway. This church was enormous. So freaking huge. They had a 7,500 seat stadium sanctuary. And
That's the way
when
it says to do it in the Bible.
when I went to see the debate, it was I mean, Hitchens. This was the first time I was in the room with Hitchens, and he was just so impressive. And they had him against Bill Dembski, and I'm like, really? you're going to take on Christopher Hitchens, and you choose Bill Dembski? Are you sure?
Thus, would the toy poodle threaten the Great Dane?
And Dembski, surprisingly, came not prepared for the debate.
What?
Oh yeah, he read one of Hitchens' books, grossly misunderstood it, and just like paraphrased a number of the arguments that he couldn't make out, and that was his entire contribution. While Hitchens had no script, had nothing written, he's just speaking from the heart with an incredible voice like a Disney villain, and it was just amazing. And they said, "Well, do you want to continue with extra time?" And I remember Hitchens saying that, "Oh yes, I'm beginning to feel engaged."
Yes.
Jolly good.
Yes, exactly.
Tommy, did you finish the chapter?
No, I didn't. I didn't finish.
Okay.
Verse 46, the decrees, the laws, and the regulations. To what are they referring to? Ibn Ezra writes that they refer to the covenant code, Exodus 20-23. Rashbam writes that they refer to the sabbatical and jubilee laws of Leviticus 25. Levine writes that this refers to the holiness code, Leviticus 17-26. And Milgrom writes that the term for regulations, Torot, refers to all the regulations mentioned in P, because this term does not occur in H. And finally, at Mount Sinai, Milgrom comments, forming an inclusio with 25:1, this phrase implies that chapters 25-26 form a separate scroll within Leviticus. This location is found twice more. First in 27:34, an attempt to attribute all of Leviticus to this Sinaitic revelation to Moses, and then in 7:38, a gloss probably traceable to H, claiming that the sacrificial laws transmitted to Israel by Moses from the tabernacle were initially revealed to him at Mount Sinai. Thus, whereas 26 verses 1-39, with the addition of verses 40-45, forms the epilogue up to the holiness source, verse 46 is the closure of to the entire book, prior to the addition of chapter 27.
Right.
I love
So
how many times it compares the relationship with God and the covenant between, God and Israel as like a marriage, and, worshiping other gods as like adultery. And I'm like, this is your contract. And if you piss me off, I get to make you eat your kids. Like,
okay, so
I need more
I have
help, Paul.
I have a bit of a, I guess, deeper question. So the beginning of this chapter, it talks about, idol, do not.
That's nice for a while.
Well, it talks about don't set carved images, pillars, figured stones, all of these things. Now, we talked about earlier about how Christianity kind of picks and chooses what of the Old Testament they keep, and there seems to be an actual pattern, right? The pattern seems to be if it's a moral law, like they keep it, but if it's like ritualistic, kosher, ritual purity, these things, then they kind of don't care about it. Now, I have one big question. I grew up, Jewish Orthodox, and we saw Christianity as being idolatry because they have figurines and idols and carved and pictures and icons and all that sort of stuff. How does Christianity square that thing? This is a moral.
Well, I don't like
law.
I don't like the Catholic Church stuff. For example.
That's
No, I'm not
actually
talking about that. I'm talking about the cross.
What do you just the cross?
Okay. Well, again,
at minimum.
That's actually been a long historical argument within Christianity. The Orthodox Church will not do statues, but they will do paintings, maybe with like some embossing on them, because it's flat,
Classic icons,
graven image. So they'll have icons like that. The Catholic Church just literally wrote that commandment out and split the coveting commandment into two so that they could have all their icons. And obviously that helped them with, facilitating bringing in new people. It's, let's be honest, you can find a justification for anything if you want. The images, there was actually a huge part of Protestantism and the Protestant Reformation, not the only thing, obviously, but it was one of the big things that they were like, how dare you? You have made us idols. You have made the worship of idols with the saints and the, symbols and all this. How dare you? This is wrong. That's why even some Christians will perhaps wear a cross, but not a crucifix. Partly because they make a great deal of the symbolism of he's not on the cross anymore, he's risen. And partly because that would actually be the figurine of Jesus, the carved image, or welded or whatever, and that would be against that commandment. It's something that,
I mean, they have crucifixes in Church of England churches, for example.
Yes, mind you, the Anglicans are they're like the insecure younger brother of the Catholic Church. So because
Catholicism with divorce.
Yeah, Catholicism with divorce, basically. And they're okay, they're cool with gay people now. But originally it was about like, we're gonna out Catholic the Catholics and we're gonna be just as grand and ceremonial as them because again, this was all born of the insecurities that because that was, Luther and Calvin, as fucked up as they were actually leaving for ideological reasons. Henry VIII was leaving because he wanted to get his dick wet. So, the kind of insecurity that comes with that, trying to show off pompously how very not inferior we are, it leads to that kind of thing. But yeah, as you get further away from Catholicism, you get people who are more or less concerned about iconography, and there are definitely whole sections of Christianity that absolutely would take that approach, that it is idolatry because you make religious carvings of specific people, even of the Holy Spirit represented by a dove, although most are not so fanatical as to like refuse to have even pictures of Bible stories or anything like that. But yeah, it's been a long-standing argument in Christianity itself. And again, as with all arguments within a faith, rivers of blood have been spilled on its account.
When I went to London, one of the times that I went there, we went to go see, Darwin's headstone, essentially, where he's buried in in whatever cathedral it is.
Westminster
And
Abbey.
yeah, and I remember seeing the outfits that the clergy wear there. It is very much like Catholicism, and the thing that surprised me, I don't know why it bothered me so much. I'm like, but these people were super reverent about it. I'm like, you really are into this, aren't you? I don't know. I just found it creepy.
You have to allow that England has been making bank off of both religious and secular iconography. I mean, really, the monarchy in Britain doesn't really. I mean, they are there for ceremonial and ritual purposes, but they also sell a lot of tourist tickets to the show. I swear that's what they do for the economy more than anything.
I mean, I went the last Sunday to a free organ recital in St. Paul's Cathedral, and there were lots of tourists there, but you didn't have to pay for it.
I do love.
It's a lovely building. I'll give it that. When we were there, there was some people actually that got out on the observation decks toward the roof. I'm like, that's awesome. How do I get up there? So
it's like
and the churches that preserve the old pipe organs, they are doing a service to art and to music. The acoustic, builds of some of these things, as an artist and musician.
It also wasn't religious music; they were just playing like classic
Yeah,
music, really.
The pipe organ. I love the giant. I love the giant pipe organs you have in Europe. I mean, when they play Tchaikovsky, especially, but even when they play Louis Louis.
Now you got to try singing with one of them. It's such a rush.
But anyway,
when
it comes to the cross, it's not idolatry when it comes to the cross from our perspective. So that feeling you get is because you don't believe in Jesus Christ being the Son of God, right? I mean, it's even probably rooted in your word for what's the word for idol in Hebrew?
Elil.
It doesn't mean
there's a word for cross
or not.
Which means when Orthodox Jewish people talk about as cross, a Christian cross, they don't call it a cross; they call it a salem.
Okay.
Salem,
well,
which is the word for figurine in
So P-Town, what is the very first commandment?
You're not supposed to worship any gods except me, right?
Right. So thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Jesus say? You cannot come to the Father but through me.
Mm-hmm.
Contradiction.
I wouldn't even call that a contradiction.
Not from our perspective.
Well, not from a Trinitarian perspective, but again, Trinitarianism was something that was invented essentially to overwrite contradictions, and in my opinion, to keep them enshrined as non-contradictory.
Okay. They failed, but the thing is, when it comes to whether or not there's a contradiction, what Jesus' it wouldn't even been Christianity, right? But what Jesus would have been understood to say there is that you're not supposed to worship him, rather you're supposed to get the proper teaching from him to worship God. So as an apocalyptic Jewish prophet, I wouldn't really see that as a contradiction.
But when Jesus says that, but when Jesus says that that he will deny, if you deny me, and I will deny you before the Father, that's contradicting what you just said.
Well, not if he's like claiming to be like the
voice,
like the prophet kind of guy.
You can have like a divine entourage, right? So, like in the same way that Satan was a judge over the earth, theologically speaking.
Entourage, the Jesus edition.
Yeah.
No, that's what they're called. It's called a divine entourage.
I think what it comes down to is your perception of God, Aaron, is you're putting God, the creator of everything, into a box, saying that God couldn't do that because
no, I'm not.
Plurality and singularity and plurality is something that an all-encompassing God can do.
No.
He could be a square. He could be a circle. He could be both at the same time.
Yeah, again,
that's not what I'm doing. But I'm going to read some comments, and we're going to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
Tom Davies offers $10 Canadian and says, "Don't let your bow tie get too tight. The lack of future entertainment is something to avoid. That's
Too
the
late.
thing I like about this snake. She'll stay on here for hours. It's amazing.
It actually
and
kinda
then
looks
Arn,
comfortable in a
Arn, I
way.
want to apologize because we had
she
an
gets a little-
update. We had an update from YouTube, so the super chats are not showing, but at least they're read out.
Oh no.
Why would
Go to
okay?
the starred section.
They
Why
did
would
something
YouTube
to
fuck
the
up?
chat.
That's
So
never happened.
the usual chats are showing,
Oh.
but
Yeah.
the super
All right.
chat's not. Go ahead.
rude.
Okay. Yeah. So John73 John offers $5. Thank you. And says, if you feed that snake a rat or something, would you be able to feel a lump slowly going around and around? Yes, I can, because she doesn't know how to loosen up. She can get tighter, so I'm not complaining. And then Zar Narankar says, I'm not sure if you talked about it, but fetishes are idols, basically statues people use in worship or worship them themselves. I wonder what the connection is to the modern usage. Wink.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
You
an
know,
item of worship. It's an item of worship. So in the kink sense, the fetish is a bodily item, a physical item or a part of the body that is worshipped in a sexual way.
Yes. And there were admittedly a lot of cults that involved sex in their
Yeah,
rites of
different.
worship and had shrine prostitutes, at least for certain gods and goddesses.
Worshipped
Eh,
worshipped in a sexual way. We
I
talk
mean,
about
as
the
in, like, you
crucifix, right? I
consider
think
it
I've seen that movie.
important. If you have a foot fetish, then the foot is the part of the body that you worship. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the object of desire.
mm.
For
Okay,
you,
chapter
for
27.
you, maybe.
Don't kink shame.
I didn't say. I don't mean you. I mean one.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to 27?
You
Yes.
have one more chat on.
All right. I got one more.
Where?
Question for
No, that's
Lawrence.
Lilith.
Yeah.
Oh, I left
No,
a little.
no,
message
that's
in.
yeah.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. So that,
Hold-
I wasn't supposed to read that, but that's okay.
No, question for Lawrence. Hold on.
All right. So
There it is.
Oh, there we go.
what?
Oh, there it is.
Oh, there we
Chapter
go, there we
27.
go.
Okay. Eric Wander says, for Lawrence, you said that chapter 27 was added later on. Do we know when? Is this chapter in every copy of Leviticus that we know of?
Oh, you're muted, Lawrence. You're muted.
Oh,
Yep, sorry. So I think it is in every copy of Leviticus that we know of, but it is kind of hard to date, right? I think Levine thinks it's about the like the funding for the temple.
Yeah, I have a comment here about this chapter from Levine as well.
Yeah, so I would think like somewhere in the 5th century, like late 5th century. That's my guess. That's just a guess. I'm not entirely certain on that.
Yeah, he writes, it is likely that chapter 27 was appended to the book of Leviticus. From a purely textual perspective, the epilogue, 26 verses 3 to 46, would seem to be a suitable conclusion to the book. But in order to include in Leviticus a matter of central importance, the founding of the sanctuary, chapter 27 was added. Maintaining the physical plant of the sanctuary was certainly costly, and it was necessary to provide the materials used in public sacrifice and to support the clergy. Okay. Yes.
All right. So now are we able to start
Yes,
27?
yes.
Lilith,
Okay.
you're muted.
The Lord said to Moses.
Wait. Peter?
I said
Peter, you wanna say-
Lilith was talking, but she's muted.
I was just saying, so they added to the holy book so they could get money for their building projects. I'm shocked. Shocked, I say.
Okay. Yeesh. All right. Now,
Okay, go.
the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, if anyone makes a special vow to dedicate a person to the Lord by giving the equivalent value, set the value of a male between the ages of 20 and 60 at 50 shekels of silver, according to their sanctuary shekel. For a female, set her value at 30 shekels. For a person between the ages of 5 and 20, set the value of a male at 20 shekels, and of a female at 10 shekels. For a person between 1 month and 5 years, set the value at a male at 5 shekels of silver, and that of a female at 3 shekels.
So Judas got ripped off then, huh?
For a person of 60 years or more, set the value of a male at 15 shekels and the female at 10 shekels. If anyone making the vow is too poor to pay the specified amount, the person being dedicated is to present to the priest, who will set the value according to the one making the vow can afford. If what they vowed is an animal that is accepted as an offering to the Lord, such an animal given to the Lord becomes holy. They must not exchange it or substitute a good one for a bad one, or a bad one for a good one. They should substitute one animal for another. If they should substitute one animal for another, both it and the substitute become holy. If what they vowed is ceremonially unclean animal, one that is not acceptable as an offering to the Lord, the animal must be presented to the priest, who will judge its quality as good or bad. Whatever value the priest then sets, that is what it will be. If the owner wishes to redeem the animal, a fifth must be added to its value. If anyone dedicates their house as something holy to the Lord, the priest shall judge its quality as good or bad. Whatever value the priest sets, so it will remain. If the one who dedicates their house wishes to redeem it, they must add a fifth to its value, and the house will again become theirs. And so I'm guessing when they add a fifth, is that a fifth of Jameson, or do you get to choose what kind of whiskey? I mean, never mind. If anyone dedicates to the Lord part of their family land, its value is to be set according to the amount of seed required for it. 50 shekels of silver to a homer or barley seed. If they dedicate a field during the year of Jubilee, the value that it has been set remains. But if they dedicate a field after the Jubilee, the priest will determine the value according to the number of years that remain until the next year of Jubilee, and its set value will be reduced. If the one who dedicates a field wishes to redeem it, they must add a fifth to its value, and the field will again become theirs, because inflation. If, however, they do not redeem the field, or if they have sold it to someone else, it can never be redeemed. When the field is released in the Jubilee, it will become holy, like a field devoted to the Lord. It will become priestly property. If anyone dedicates to the Lord a field they have bought, which is not part of their family land, the priest will determine its value up to the year of Jubilee, and the owner must pay its value on that day as something holy to the Lord. If in the year of Jubilee the field will revert to the person whom it was bought, the one whose land it was, every value is to be set according to the sanctuary shekel, 20 gerahs to the shekel, because inflation doesn't work here. We just have a standard rate. No one, however, may dedicate the firstborn of an animal, since the firstborn already belongs to the Lord. Whether an ox or a sheep, it is the Lord's. If it is one of the unclean animals, it may be brought back at its set value, adding a fifth of the value to it. If it is not redeemed, it is to be sold at set value. But nothing that a person owns and devotes to the Lord, whether a human being or an animal or family land, may be sold or redeemed. Everything so devoted is most holy to the Lord. No person devoted to destruction. Let me say that again. No person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They are to be put to death.
The translation
it's
here
someone
is a
who
bit
is-
iffy. Yeah.
Is it someone who is sentenced to death can't be prescribed?
Yes. Yep.
I mean,
sorry.
Don't slow him down.
J-
We're almost done with Leviticus.
Or
I mean,
cannot be
JPS
done so fast,
the JPS translation is different here. No human being who has been proscribed can be ransomed. He shall not be. He shall be put to death.
We'll haggle that in a moment. Let me get the last of this out. A tithe of everything from the Lord, whether from the grain or soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord and will be collected by the priests who represent the Lord, because that's the way this scam operates. Every tithe of herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy to the Lord, because this is a hell of a profitable scam, I'll tell you.
I think you skipped
No
that
one
verse.
No one may pick out the good from the bad or make any substitution. If anyone does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute become holy and cannot be redeemed. These are the commands the Lord gave Moses at Mount Sinai for the Israelites.
It does have a feel like a rendition, or I mean an addition.
It
Yeah,
does.
there you go.
Yeah,
you're
there you
getting
go.
it.
And you don't-
P-Town, you're getting it.
I have to say though,
Blasphemy.
20%.
Blasphemy.
This part.
Yo, claps for P-Town. Claps for P-Town.
Blasphemy.
Indeed.
What happened? Sorry, my internet is out.
Tom had drifted off.
I did. What happened?
He was like, it does kind of feel like an addition.
Yeah,
Yes.
which true. I have to say too, 20% add-on. Like, what is this? A payday loan center? Jesus.
Well, JPS translates to 1/5, which I think
20%.
20%.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought like
You're the one who's supposed to be into
Yeah,
math.
come on.
No, because I think I've heard 1/5 of the sum, which I thought was a bit strange, but
No, it's add on a fifth, which means an
Yeah,
increase
okay.
of 20%.
yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
the
it's
fifth
like
is
if
worth
something
a lot
is-
more than a pint.
I'm not good at economics.
Yeah. If you dedicate something to the temple or whatever and you want it back, you can redeem it by paying its value, by giving money instead of the item. But you can't just give the equivalent value, you have to add on a fifth.
But if you offer a human being to be sacrificed, they cannot be redeemed.
No.
I
Not-
Sorry,
not
this
quite.
rendition. Is
Oh, it's one of those times when what that's what the Bible says becomes that's not what it means.
not, because
More like
it
bad
doesn't
translation.
say that. It doesn't really say that. I mean, in the Hebrew, it
Oh, it doesn't
imply that.
really say that.
I
get it.
because it doesn't, Aaron.
They're
Okay.
reading
Don't-
the
don't
Hebrew,
anger
that
me,
is
Aaron.
POG.
Don't anger me.
Arn,
Okay,
can you
I
read
like this
some?
new tone from you, Tomer.
Arn, can you read
Yeah.
some chats? I just offered a small baby to Satan, so the chat should work again.
All right. John Klein offers $5 and says, "Can someone please toss a 'and it came to pass' in there just for fun?"
The problem is
Somebody
nothing's
was-
happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's not too. We here we're going through the legal shit. When we get into the next chapter, then we get into the horror. Okay, so Zarnarin Kar says, "I hate to say this, but the book is literally saying this. The Bible is actually saying women are 3/5 of a man." Question: does this have connection to the 3/5 compromise in the U.S.?
Well,
I
I
am
suspect
not-
that it
Probably.
does.
I'm
well,
not-
But
it's
elsewhere-
actually- Sorry.
What is
Elsewhere, it does describe that women as slaves. If you're buying them as slaves, women are half price.
Yeah, essentially.
Wow.
Well, I have an
They are
interesting
viewed as lesser.
comment. I have an interesting comment about this later on.
I think it is based on the slavery price, isn't it?
Oh, they got to use the slaves as. Oh, that's right, but they didn't get a vote. The 3/5 compromise. I remember this. What does that have to do with women?
Because
I don't
it's
get his
literally
point.
3/5
Because it's the same
value.
ratio.
Subclass.
Yeah.
Subclass of
A
human.
man, a boy, a little boy is $5. A little girl is $3.
I would like to invite anyone to attempt to treat me as 3/5 of a person.
Already did it.
You will not survive the attempt. Excuse me, Mr. Mathematician, who didn't know that a fifth was 20%.
No, I knew it, but just the reading.
Someone had
The
to
reading
say
of
it,
this was
huh?
odd.
That's
Yeah,
gonna haunt
somebody
you,
had to say it.
Tora.
It's going
Yeah,
to
you're
haunt
never
me,
getting
of
over
course.
that.
Yes, it will. It's mostly my yeah. I can't escape it.
That's what happens when you drift off reading the Bible.
Yeah. Thank you, internet. Thank you, optic fibers.
So the unlucky legume offers $50. Thank you very much. And says, I recently got into a discussion with a coworker about when the Pentateuch was written and by whom. He was convinced that it was written by Moses himself in about 13th century BC. When was it actually written, and how do we know?
That is yeah. So we talked
A
about
big
this a few times. Sorry, everyone, including P-Town, not by Moses. So the estimates
Awesome.
do range because we're talking about potentially different source documents. So if we're talking about a full composition, that probably would have been around. It would have been in the 6th century, 6th or 5th centuries. But then we have some earlier texts that go to like the 8th century, like Hosea and Amos. But sorry, they're talking about the Pentateuch. My bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pentateuch, you'd have probably the latest edition being the story of Joseph, which would be probably a Persian or Hellenistic edition. But when it comes to like when we're thinking of like the book as a whole, it's like around the 6th or 5th century, somewhere.
And
the turn of
If
the
you
It
want
was
to know what
never
the
all
Bible
written-
says, then he's only about
We are reading
1,000
it.
years off.
Yeah, it was never
Yes,
all
if-
written
if-
out
if I would
one
like-
time.
if I would
I know
like
what the Bible says.
if I would like to
We could-
take the propaganda as it is, I could read that into it. But unfortunately, I am
We
not
can
that
talk.
kind of
We can
person.
talk about this more when we get to the bit where it says, "And Moses died, and there never was a prophet like him until this day."
Yeah,
He's
and then
very humble.
Was 5 minutes later. I swear it was a really impressive 5 minutes, though.
Moses was the
it's-
most humble person.
This was
He's
Joshua speaking. Yeah.
Super
Right, yeah.
humble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, it was compiled after the return from the exile to Babylon under the Persian king. That's when it was basically canonized and put together in its final form. The source material it draws from is vast, and we aren't sure of the dates of all of it. I mean, Deuteronomy, we can be reasonably certain about when that was written, but like a lot of the other stuff, it's a matter of a debate among I frequently recommend that people start with the documentary hypothesis because it's a simple enough way to break down to get an understanding of the debate, but it's not comprehensive. It's a good starting place. There's always more to it, but it at least, I mean, for author libraries isn't sufficient to explain it all, but it at least gives you an idea of what kind of a breakdown you're looking at.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so a good book on this, a good starting book on this. It's Richard Elliott Friedman's Who Wrote the Bible is a very good starting point. Now he kind of trails off in the last 2 chapters of his book, but he does a good job of demonstrating how scholarship kind of like the kind of mindset that you have to be in when approaching the scholarship, when talking about different authors. So he does a fairly good job there. But what you shouldn't probably take as seriously is like because he's more of the classic documentary hypothesis kind of guy. So he's like, oh yeah, J was written in like around 1000 BCE or something like that, which is wholly untenable at this point, I think.
Yeah, J&E are source libraries. That's not a single dude that was writing at a single time. That's like if this was taken from the Library of Alexandria, these 3 chapters. I don't know when the fuck it was written.
Yeah, but the thing is, that would be a good starting point. And then I would definitely recommend the work of Van Setters because I think he argues very, very well. Although he does get into some technical stuff sometimes, so it might not be super easy. But it's after getting introduction to the documentary hypothesis, you could start to read stuff about the supplementary hypothesis, and that's basically the camp I fall into. And I think Van Setters does a really good job of arguing for it.
Yeah, I got a comment. I mean, this was not a selected comment. It was just one that I happened to see. Somebody named Dr. Dickhead says that, seemingly appropriate name, says David Berlinski would be another worthy opponent to Aaron Ra because it seems like Aaron Ra likes to punch down. Just saying. Well, because you made that comment, I have to point out that I've been invited to debate a handful of other people this month, and I've turned them all down because all of them are punching down. And the only time I do this is because, well, how about if we pay you more? Okay, fine. I do need money, like a lot. So I don't. So that's the only reason I'm doing these debates. Berlinski, however, would be punching down, not a worthy debate opponent. But if you want to pay me to punch down, I'd be happy to debate Berlinski. I've always considered him an idiot, and it would be a fun thing to do. One of the other Discovery Institute fellows bragged on Twitter that he had a debate scheduled with me that I never knew about. That nobody told me that I was supposed to debate this guy. But then once I found out about it, I never heard another word about it. So why, if you want me to punch, show me who you think would be punching up, and let's see if we can get them. We already know that that Bill Craig will only debate PhDs unless they're famous enough that he can pull himself up by their bootstraps. So see who you can. If you want me to debate somebody, show me who it is, and set it up. I'm happy to. Just get the only thing that matters is the topic. We have to agree on that. I don't care who the opponent is, only the topic. All right, we may continue.
Yeah, I just want to say with regard to the who and when wrote the Bible, there is if you don't have the longest attention span, there is a couple of videos by Useful Charts that kind of introduce the chapter commentary and what was the other one? The suppository hypothesis?
Supplement. And I suck at English.
I did that on purpose.
There are two other camps that people fall into. So there's obviously there's documentary hypothesis. There's also supplementary hypothesis and
fragmentary.
Fragmentary.
Yeah. So if you look up a Useful Chart, who wrote the Bible and when was the Bible written? There's also a whole series that goes through the Hebrew and Christian Bible called the Introduction to the Bible from an academic point of view.
Yale.
Very good stuff.
There's Yale. I believe it's Yale. It's either Yale or Harvard.
I'm going to
but I'm pretty sure it's Yale. Just a second. Has an introductory course on both the Old and New Testament that you can just run the YouTube. You can just sit and listen to the lectures and leave them on while you frickin' do your dishes or whatever.
Is that the one that's run by Christine Hayes? Is it that one?
I believe she runs one of them,
okay.
If I remember. But again, that's an introductory course, so you're not covering the stuff that is debated at the highest level. This is the established basics, so you're not going off into crazy town or doing something specially. And so it's they basically had so many religious kids signing up for this and getting shocked out of their faith that they basically just put all the stuff online so that people could actually be academic and shit.
Okay, I'm gonna ditch out before Tomer's commentary on this one. But hey, numbers 1 and 2. Numbers 2. We have to please let's draw out this encampment.
Will be very interesting indeed.
Let's do it.
We will. We'll get there.
All right, it's our next sode. So all right, goodbye.
That's
everybody.
the merch idea. We're gonna sell T-shirts with Tomer loves numbers.
Do I have to send you stuff up front, Peter, in order to get it on screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to have something on screen, you have to email me that before the show.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Right. I got one more comment, and this is from Mars. Why would a deity promote centralized power if he has power over all? Wouldn't the goal be decentralize and empower all followers, not just the tithe collectors, if it's purely spiritual?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I also prepared something for numbers 2.
Good.
Well, it's an important part of all religious faiths and all sacred writings that we should know that truly the highest things are above, and we should put our treasure there because, the things of this earth pass away, and truly only the things of heaven are of great value. And we should not be bound by greed and avarice. And in a completely unrelated note, send 10% of all your money to this address.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this was a temple text, right? This is not a deity doing this. But I think the theological apologetic maybe for this would be something like, well, this is where it needs to be done because there was some special connotation to Jerusalem. For example, there have been like some traditions that show, you know, Jerusalem as like the center of the earth, for example. Although a lot of ancient map makers, people who were not just map makers,
Cartographers.
yeah, cartographers, but also like people who were talking about because I've been reading this book on here we go, yeah, Mesopotamian cosmic geography. This was what I was researching before the show. So like but this lists, you know, Mesopotamian, also Assyrian and stuff. And in their texts where they start describing the layers of the universe and the construction of Earth and stuff, very often they are the places that they are writing from, or the places that they are, like, you know, where their home is, or the main city is often in the middle. So it has a theological, it carries this theological connotation of speciality. So that might be part of the apologetic for that.
Okay. You got one more
think I
comment.
made
This is Trevor and Wright. Trevor and Wright says, it sure seems to me that the price for things being sold in the Bible is always expensive. Just follow the money to know where that leads you.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I made a mistake. The suppository documentary, the suppository hypothesis is something to do with the golden
Supplementary.
tablets.
Supplementary.
No, I was correcting myself. The suppository hypothesis is to do with the golden tablets.
Ah.
Or
Oh.
or the God, what was it? The hemorrhoids. Where was that? The golden hemorrhoids. Where was?
Oh.
Wait, what?
That's when the Philistines steal the ark and they have to send golden hemorrhoids and rats as an offering to Jehovah.
Yeah, I remember some
What?
hemorrhoids.
Yeah,
in
we
the
were
Bible.
talking about
yeah,
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in Samuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, First
Yeah, it was in
Samuel.
Samuel.
Samuel,
It was in
yep.
Samuel. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Back to this chapter. Verse 2, a special vow. In Hebrew, it's Yafli Neder. The Targums, followed by Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Rashbam, interpret this phrase as to vocally express a vow. The Septuagint renders vows a vow, and KJV a singular vow. Levine renders it set aside a votive offering. Milgrom, citing Naphtali Hirtz Wesley, renders extraordinary vow, and writes that this vow was extraordinary or special because it was unconditional, meaning that while other vows were conditional and dependent on the fulfillment of an expressed wish, for example, Jacob in Genesis 28 verses 20-22, this vow was not attached to any prior condition.
So you just
Just
made
like,
this
I will
vow
give.
to God because you were really, really into him, and Totes just wanted to make him smile.
I
Yeah.
pledge
Bring them
$1,000.
Now, about verses 3-7. So Milgrom comments, when male and female valuations are compared, the results show that women as a class must have been considered an indispensable, powerful element in the Israelite labor force. Carol Mayers cogently argues that the variation in the female percentage of the combined value of a male and a female in each age group reflects realistically the value of the woman's productivity relative to the male's. Obviously, children below the age of 5 would contribute little to the labor force, and especially in view of their high mortality rate, their valuations would be low. In the next age group, 5 to 20 years, the percentage of the women's value is at its lowest, which would be expected since it coincides with the highest childbearing year, with their attendant mortality risks. In the following years, the women's relative worth increases, reaching its maximum in the senior years when male's efficiency declines, whereas the female is able to continue her domestic responsibilities and register a minimal decrease in productivity. Above all, the high relative percentage of women, at or near 40%, demonstrates without a doubt that they achieved a high status in Israelite society.
Because it's an entirely different thing if you're getting livestock for breeding, or if you need somebody who knows how to cook and clean.
Reminds me of a modest proposal somehow.
Yeah, I mean, if they couldn't be enslaved for life, and they couldn't, so their children wouldn't become slaves, then it would just be a comparison of, as you said, labor force. So
Yeah.
it would have been, yeah, as you say, closer than I guess in other places where, well, not closer. I guess it would have been further apart. Where other places they would have put more value on a woman slave.
And bringing
because-
to mind the value of a
Babies.
3/5 compromise, we should also remember how many wonderful skills Black people enslaved in America got out of the experience.
Yes, and we have history books, or had history books here in Texas recently that actually said that the African or the immigrant workers from Africa benefited from slavery by becoming Christian.
Ron DeSantis said that last week. Oh, by becoming
Did he
Christian,
really?
Doesn't surprise me.
No, he was the benefits of the pushing for the education to include the benefits of the, skills.
Oh
by
yeah,
being
yeah, that's
enslaved.
right.
The Christian thing, I think, is just implied for him because, it saved their souls
Yeah, it has been
then-
said though for a long time.
a very long time.
Yeah. And then Dan Wonderly, another comment, says, offers $9.99. Thank you. And says, Satan had knowledge of God, yet rejected him. What does this say about the illusion of free will? Well, it tells you that although we are led to believe that angels did not have free will, clearly they did, because Satan was supposed to be an angel, and yet he rejected God. But
Christian angels.
Yeah, Christian
But
angels. have free will.
we don't have free will because God is capable of prophecy and knows what we're going to do before we do it.
And I have heard the argument that to see a person do something is not to make him do it, and to have an eternal perspective is to see what will be, which is not the same as to cause it, which would be true if you were not also omnipotent.
Yeah,
you
that's
can
the
affect-
tricky bit.
Yeah,
A lot of people do get hung up on that. Like, just because he can see it happen doesn't mean you don't have a choice. But the thing is, he's choosing which people to create, whether to create you or create someone else who will make a different choice. Since he's
And the
choosing you, he's making your choices.
Yeah,
And the
and
nature nurture
circumstances.
argument is a lot of that is, you if you think that God brings rain or whatever, then he chose who you were born to and what your parents are like.
I'm sorry, I'm just remembering when Trump did this recent interview where he was talking about how he was trying to do a whataboutism to defend himself about his poor response to COVID. He said, "Well, look, what about all these mosquitoes? I mean, we lost 35,000 people to mosquitoes, and mosquitoes come from water, and water comes from heaven. Heaven, water comes from heaven."
Is that his
Yeah,
defense?
it's right
It's
next
an
to
act
the
of God.
storehouses of hail.
It's
The
an act of
hurricanes are
God.
very wet, you know.
Mosquitoes come from water. I like
Yeah.
that one.
Just like the ocean, it's really, really, really wet. You remember when we said that?
I remember when he said
I
that
don't
you should
remember, but I
sweep
I
out
feel
your
like
forests.
that's real.
Okay, I think we're derailing a bit.
Okay. So,
verse 7. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Are you not done?
No, I'm not done,
Hasn't-
actually.
Barely
Oh,
started.
say it.
No, verse 7. Talmud Alchin 19a reads, I like this one. Talmud Alchin 19a reads, what is different with regard to a female that when she ages and stands at 1/3, and what is different with regard to a male that does not stand at 1/3? Rabbi Chizkiah said, people say, an elderly man in the house is a burden in the house. An elderly woman in the house is a treasure in the house.
They
So
know how to
1/3
cook
of
and
their
clean.
Young price.
Yes.
I gotta love those gilfs.
Also, women aged.
No.
What? Gills.
Gilfs.
Gilfs.
You've heard of the
Work-
term
work it out,
milf
Isaac.
or dilf? Yeah, you work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Verse.
I prefer Bilf because, like, Bobby.
Nope. Verse 10.
No.
Verse 10. They must not exchange
bridge.
it or substitute. Nope. Bechol Shor, followed by Chizkuni, gives a rationale for this rule. Quote, they must not exchange even bad for good, since when you decide to exchange, there are times where you assert that the bad is good and the good is bad, and you do not know what disease the animal has or whether it is disqualified for an offering. Terrified. Quote.
I thought
verse
this mostly had to do with the tithe, because they were supposed to say every 10th, that like make them all walk under the shepherd's staff, and so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and just, you know, whichever the 10th one was that came through would have to be, regardless of whether it was, you know, ceremonially clean or not.
verse
How do you
16.
determine that?
Sorry.
How do you determine what is clean and not clean in animals?
Have they
We
been
just
rained
spent
on?
an
We just read
entire
that.
we just spent an entire book listening to that.
You
Yes.
have to check if it's got crushed testicles.
Yes.
Or
Exactly.
is blind in one eye.
Verse 16. Its value is to be set according to the amount of seed required. And Levine comments, the method of delineating plots of arable land by reference to the quality of seed required in the planting is common to many ancient Near Eastern societies. The formula used here, zera chomer, a chomer of seed, means an area sown with a chomer of seed. The term chomer literally means a mule, but the Hebrew term and its cognates in Akkadian and Ugaritic designate a dry measure, equal to the normal load of an ass. Estimates of its bulk vary from... Yes, he uses the term ass. Laugh, laugh, laugh,
No,
laugh,
no, no, no,
laugh.
no,
I
no.
knew-
You
I
just
knew
literally said it's a buttload.
It is,
Yes,
it
indeed.
is a buttload.
Yeah, but is it a
Well, that's a
Beyonce
unit for
buttload,
wine.
or-
Yeah, buttload is a different unit. That is true.
Yes. Estimates of its bulk vary from 3.8 to 6.5 bushels. According to Ezekiel 45:11 forward, the most extensive catalog of weights and measures preserved in the Bible, a chomer equals 10 ephah. It was equivalent to the kul, Sumerian gur and Akkadian kul. Verses 26 to 27, Bamberger comments, verse 26 states, reasonably enough, that the firstborn animal cannot be the object of a special vow since it already belongs to God. But verse 27 is a problem, for Exodus 13:13 requires that the firstling of an ass must be redeemed with a lamb. By implication, other impure quote-unquote animals are not subject to the law of firstlings at all. Moreover, according to Jewish tradition, the firstborn animal and the redemption lamb of Exodus, as well as the redemption money for firstborn son, are to be given to an individual priest chosen by the donor, whereas the present verse implies that the firstling belongs to the sanctuary. The traditional expositors therefore held that verse 27 is not connected with verse 26 and does not refer to firstlings. It concerns animals consecrated so that the proceeds of their sale may go to the sanctuary. Nevertheless, verses 26 to 27 certainly seem to belong together. From a modern critical standpoint, they may be a fragment of a different law about firstling, which eventually did not prevail.
So the priests get every firstborn animal and every first harvest of the fields, and then also a 10th of everything else.
Yeah, they always get the finest produce with no stems or seeds.
Extra virgin olive oil.
And the bread with
No.
the crust cut off.
Verse 28, devote. In Hebrew, it's cherem. Levine writes that the verb chet resh mem means to set apart, denote, or restrict, and always has a negative or prohibitive connotation. To designate something as cherem means either that it is to be destroyed completely, or that it is reserved for specific purposes associated with a sanctuary. This term was associated with war, as a depiction of the pre-Israelite practice to donate the spoils of war to gods, including conquering cities and killing its army or civilians that refused to surrender. He writes that the institution of the cherem in the biblical law is carried over into the context of judicial punishment, where the penalty for worshipping other gods is death. He writes that while this explains verse 29, there's a serious difficulty with respect to verse 28. Quote, from what we know of cherem, it is an imposed condition. One would not speak of voluntary proscribing a field, nor did this difficulty go unnoticed by the rabbinic sages and the medieval commentators. Two related explanations are given. First, verse 28 may be speaking of a man who swore to devote his property. Or, second, it may be speaking of one who took an oath in another matter, swearing that if he failed to uphold that oath, his property would be forfeit as cherem. In either case, the oath once taken made of the act of devotion a binding obligation. It was no longer a voluntary act. On this basis, one could translate verse 28 as follows, but anything that the man swears to devote as prescribed property to the Lord. In late Second Temple times, this was a common practice. One would state, Harei alai becherem, I owe this under penalty of proscription. Such oaths were called haramim, because it was stipulated that the penalty for failure to uphold the oath was the proscription or confiscation of one's property by the temple.
So the idea here behind 28 and 29 is that if you would be like for 28 especially, right? So if anything he has, whether of humans or animals or the field of his holding, so it also says that shall not be sold and shall not be redeemed. So if you are giving a person over to the temple, and that person shouldn't be sold because they belong to God, right? And then in verse 29, that prescription is, well, I think Milgrom makes an argument that this one wouldn't be to Yahweh, because we have we have like Holy of Holies. Sorry, what is it here? Anything prescribed is Holy of Holies to the Lord. So because we don't have that prescription in the next verse, then it wouldn't be a devotion or a prescription to God. So in this case, you could have like an instance of like a slave that you take, a non-Israelite slave, right? And you can't you can't sell them again, because as it says in the next part there, he is doomed to die. So that would be it's a very judicial thing. I think Tomer noted that part.
I wonder how that would be applied to the tithe of little virgin girls that were preserved from the genocide of their people, of which it is said that a tithe was given to the priests or to the Lord.
My final comment for Leviticus, verses 30 to 33. Bamberger writes that these verses are baffling, quote unquote. He notes that verse 30 states that all tithes are holy to the Lord, i.e. belong to the priests or to the sanctuary. However, according to Numbers 18:21 forward, the tithes are assigned to the Levites, and once they give a tithe of their tithe to the priests, the remainder is their property and may be consumed without any of the restrictions applicable to sacred donations. Therefore, some, like Rashi, Rashbam, and Gersonides, identified the tithe in verse 30 as the second tithe, quote unquote, in Deuteronomy 14:22 forward. This tithe remained 2 years out of 3 in the possession of the farmer, who was to take it to Jerusalem for a festive celebration. He writes, however, that this identification is dubious, since Deuteronomy permits the owner who lives far from Jerusalem to substitute money for the tithe and expand the sum on the sacred meal in Jerusalem. Nothing is said there about the additional 20% specified in verse 31. He further notes that verses 32 to 33 call for a tithe of animals, which is not mentioned elsewhere in the Torah. While the rabbis wrote that these animals remain in the owner's possession and were to be consumed in a festive meal, 2 Chronicles 31:6 tells of an occasion when the tithe of cattle was presented at the temple as a sacred donation. Bamberger therefore concludes that these laws represent an entirely divergent tithe system, either a fragment of an old tradition otherwise discarded or an ill-fated attempt at reform. And that's it for Leviticus.
I think I'm just happy that that P-Town also noticed this was a later edition.
That was
you
a
notice that
remarkable
contradiction?
addition.
Yep. Small victories.
And then the contradiction over here that Tomer just mentioned.
Yeah. So we will pick up again on Numbers now. We will begin the book of Numbers, where, as I mentioned before, we get past the legislation and into the horror.
Well, we do have legislation. We do have some.
We do?
But yes, but we have the Nazarites, the ordeal for the adulteress, all that fun stuff.
Don't worry, there's a bunch of genealogy at the beginning and numbering. Not genealogy, census. Sorry, there's a bunch of census at the beginning that's terribly boring. And
Isaac, you need to read that because Hebrew.
Yep.
There's also once we get done with Numbers, we're gonna have more legal stuff in Deuteronomy. But then with Joshua, we get into some very juicy stuff. Joshua.
Looking forward to it.
And Judges.
I love the smell of genocide in the morning.
By the way, Lorence, I did plead a case with when I went to Canada this last weekend. I did try to arrange and this may actually happen. I want to have a conversation between you and Francesca Stavrakopoulou. I would love to see that, and a number of other people would too. And I was when I spoke very high. You mentioned how your name came up in the latest video that I just uploaded.
Josh was like, "Yeah, I'm sure Lawrence has spoken about this." I'm like, "Oh, what? I wasn't expecting anyone to say that."
Oh, what you didn't hear, what was recorded prior to that. He quite likes you, and we both spoke very well of you.
What about me?
So,
Let Lawrence have his moment.
We've had Josh on Atheist Sunday School a couple times, I think. I asked if he would go on there again, and he noted that it was just a very research intensive show, so he wouldn't want to do that now, especially since we're in the New Testament. But yeah, I love Dr. Josh's stuff. Great guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was delighted that he did that video with me. He was very accommodating, and it turned out really well. Sadly, my microphone didn't work. We got good enough audio, barely.
I was wondering.
It wasn't the quality. Yeah, it wasn't the mic that I bought worked exactly one time, and the fucking thing fell apart immediately after that. Literally fell apart after that. So I just had to rely on the fact that we're in a quiet room. So, and there was no way to do that again. I thought it was a very choice, very good interview for the time. But anyway, enough of that. We will see everybody this coming Saturday for our normal show. Yes, and we will begin the Book of Numbers. Yes.
Yes, we
Yes.
will.
Will you shut up? Call your.
He's excited about numbers.
He likes genocide. It's his favorite.
All right. See you Saturday, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Right, so-